Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1055 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. I left this chapter with about 3 things in my mind. First off, Shanks is awesome. Second off, Wano is awesome. And thirdly, the debate of Admiral versus Yonko is now officially over because Shanks is awesome. Straight up, this was a power scaling chapter. Like, that was the literal point of it. We introduced Admiral Ryokugu or Green Bull in the last couple chapters. We wonder what he's going to do. We wonder how strong he is. We see him in this chapter solo pretty much all the scabbards plus Yamato and Momonosuke with relative ease. Alright, we're starting to build the hype of Green Bull. Momo unlocks Blast Breath, and it's very clear that Green Bull is not anticipating this. It actually does something to him, but I don't think that Momonosuke was going to beat him. It also really demonstrated how cool Green Bull's abilities are, which I just want to take a moment to say, like, wow. Green Bull's abilities, just the little seedling that grew into him it is the coolest thing. I love all of that. And then Shanks flexed, and Green Bull pissed himself. Like, quite literally, this isn't reading between the lines. No, that's what happened. Green Bull literally pissed himself. Speaking of debates from the beginning of time itself, this is one of them, and now it is officially over. Over forever. But I want to make this clear. A lot of the times when people are power scaling, including myself, you organize information in a way that you can organize it. And so what this usually amounts to, and what this historically has amounted to, is that Yonko level is a definitive sort of power level, and all of the Yonko fulfill those requirements. So basically, all the Yonko are similar in power. This is the same thing has been true for Admiral level as well. But you notice that people don't often use Shichibukai or Warlord level. And the reason that they don't use this as a power scaling tier is because not all the Warlords were equally powerful. No way. Doflamingo was leaps and bounds stronger than Crocodile. There's no debate there. Luffy defeated Doflamingo in the post-time skip needing Gear 4th, and there's just no way. It makes Warlord level or Shichibukai level a very sketchy proposition, but this is more often than not how the story actually works. Like, we want to organize the groups into tiers, but individuals from those tiers don't have to be the same strength. So the labels for the tiers, generally speaking, tend to be about groups that we've seen in action less. We just generally know less about. Yonko level was a term that predated really fighting any of the Yonko. Before we know how strong Shanks is, or Kaido, or Big Mom, we just presume that they're all of the same strength, and that might have been true. But now it's certainly not true, because Buggy is a Yonko, right? That could have been the case before. Big Mom, for instance, I think that she is still incredibly powerful individually, but she could have been like Gecko Moria, and just lazy and old or sick, and that is also true as well, and that would affect how you would rank her. So the tier is best defined before we actually know anything. Maybe the best example of this is Yonko Commander level, right? When we first meet Jack, oh, Yonko Commander level, and then we find out in Whole Cake Island, like, oh, well, on one hand you have Katakuri, on the other hand you have Cracker, and it doesn't appear that close. So then, using the term Yonko Commander level is just, it loses its weight. You've got to start subdividing. First Commander level, second Commander level, etc. It gets real convoluted real fast. But the point of what I'm saying here, basically, is that Admiral level is a term that's used, and it doesn't mean that all Admirals are the same strength. So I think that you can generally judge the group as a whole, as right now, definitely weaker than the Yonko, but that doesn't mean like a character like Akainu can't be of a Yonko level, say, or a higher tier than the other Admirals. Personally, narratively, I think that would make a bit of sense. And I also kind of expect him to be even stronger than he was in Marineford whenever we encounter him in the future. Will he be on Shanks' level at that time? We will find out, but stronger than the other Admirals, I expect so. I'm sure that some people have already begun to do this, but it's definitely going to be more popular. Now, let's start the subdividing. You have Admiral level, and then you have Fleet Admiral level, right? But yeah, overall, the way that Green Bull was portrayed in comparison to Shanks in this chapter really is no surprise based on the actual events that we've seen in the story. Remember, Whitebeard was the strongest man period. He came to Marineford by himself, the sole Yonko there, and took on all of the Marine admirals simultaneously while he was old and he was sick, and it was a good fight. Characters like Marco needed to be handcuffed in order for the Marines to gain an advantage. Even more than that, Kainu needed to coerce one of Whitebeard's allies in order to stab him in the back, which clearly affected the battle to some degree as well. Just based on purely what you're given, the impression should have been that Yonko are stronger than admirals, and the only reason why this debate was a thing of admirals being on the same level as Yonko is just purely narrative reasons. Has nothing to do with what we actually saw in the story. It has to do with people's theories and their expectations about the role that admirals should play within the story. This all ties back to the idea that the world government, fighting the world government is the actual endgame. Like Luffy will fight Blackbeard for supremacy, become the Pirate King, and then the battle will shift to Mary Joie, where they'll fight the Celestial Dragons, Gorosei, and the Admirals. And so because that fight comes after, they need to be at least of a similar level of strength as the foes that Luffy has already beaten, which would have been the Yonko. That's the whole premise of what substantiates admirals being as strong as Yonko. Nothing in the story, and I think at this point you can pretty much definitively say that the admirals matter far less than a lot of people thought that they did. With the possible exception of Akainu, they're not in-game villains. They're just not. For somebody like Luffy at the end of the story, they're a nuisance and or second tier foes, potentially given to other lower members of the Strats or weaker members, less powerful members of the Strats or their allies. As we reach the end of this chapter and we see the Strats sort of chillin', they totally knew that Green Bull was here and watched Momonosuke and the others fight them. The expression on their faces, their confidence, it's just absurdly clear that if the Strats had involved themselves, they would have washed Green Bull, no doubt. And that's not to say that Green Bull isn't powerful. Obviously, everything is relative, right? Like, Green Bull defeated all of the Scabbards and Yamato and Momonosuke, or was going to do so, and I think that that puts Green Bull on a higher level than Yonko commanders. I think that Green Bull could probably fight on par with, or probably stronger than any of the commanders. Say a Green Bull Marco fight or a Green Bull Katakuri fight. That could be a close fight that I could see Green Bull winning just based on what we're given here. Depending on how strong Yamato is, which is a question in and of itself. I know that Yamato fought solo against Kaido, but there's so many elements of that fight where it's hard to directly power scale it. So that's the big question. Like, how strong is Yamato really determines where you place Green Bull. But regardless, when Shanks showed up, Green Bull ran. So while part of this is disappointing to me, it was nice that even though we lost the hype for Green Bull, we built the hype for Shanks. So that counterbalanced itself. But yeah, I would have liked if the Admirals had a larger role in the story, or posed more of a threat. Mainly because, trying to be as honest as possible, I just think that the Admirals are really cool. From the moment that they were introduced in the story, I had very big expectations for them. And definitely where we stand now, that those expectations are not met and probably will never be. The Strats and Luffy essentially skipped them without needing to defeat them first. And this probably has a lot to do with whatever Oda's intentions were for them that we as fans misunderstood. Like, if you think about the Marines as an entire pirate crew rather than having 3 Yonko level fighters, they have maybe 1 and then commander levels, making them as a whole plus the Shichibukai of the same level as a Yonko crew, just 1. But at the same time, there's a part of me that realizes that a lot of the story doesn't make too much sense if the Admirals are too powerful. It just doesn't, because the Yonko have existed unopposed. The world government has literally been afraid of them for the last 30 years at least. If they had 3 Yonko level fighters, or fighters that could individually fight Yonko, then they could have targeted each actual Yonko individually and defeated them. But the impression that we got, the balance of the world, is that the Marines plus the Chichibukai allowed for them to simply keep the pirates at bay. It more so power scales it such that if a Yonko decided to attack the government could defend itself. But the outcome would be questionable, which seems very true when you look back at Marineford. If Whitebeard had decided to attack them 10 years sooner, Whitebeard might have been able to win, or at least that would have been massive casualties for the Marines. So yeah, I personally wanted the admirals to be stronger, but as we sit here now, I think that perhaps a lot of that was cope. And now we've gotten to this moment and it's like, yeah, you know what? Yonko being where they are, Shanks doing what he did, that's the way that it has always been set up to be. But we've had some of these discussions before. One of the things that's really questionable about admirals, and I think it's emphasized here, what Oda really showcased with Shanks is because of his haki. Green Bull felt that, and to me I got the impression that, without question, Shanks' haki is greater than Green Bull's. This is without mentioning what appears to be some sort of haki telekinesis power, where he could project himself into Green Bull's mind, like have a conversation with Green Bull from the seas outside Wano. Even Luffy got a mental image of Shanks as well, so this is a totally new ability. Again, Shanks' haki is top tier, and the question with the admirals has always been like, I mean, if you're subservient to the government, what does that say about your willpower? So far, every single Yonko has demonstrated Conqueror's haki, the will of a king, and we have yet to see that from any admiral. Again, Akainu could. Potentially, I could see it. But as a group, if you generalize them, it just doesn't appear like they have it. And from their position, it makes a lot of sense. Those with the disposition of a king don't join the Marines. They become pirates. The only exception to this rule was Fleet Admiral Sengoku. We learned from a Viva card that he does have Conqueror's haki. So again, it substantiates this argument that Akainu might have it or might develop it as a fleet admiral and then rise to a higher level individually. But yeah, it does really feel like Conqueror's haki is the big difference maker, and Wano probably established that pretty definitively even before we got here, because the only reason that Luffy was able to fight on par with Kaido, we found out the ability that would allow Luffy to damage him is a Conqueror's haki ability. Without that, you're probably never a true top tier of the world. So how do we scale the admirals in this case? Well, we know that certain Yonko commanders like Katakuri, for instance, possess Conqueror's haki, but haven't yet fully developed it. That could be a difference maker. The other thing is that admirals all possess top tier devil fruits. So the top tier devil fruit augments somewhat the admiral's powers against those who may have Conquerors but haven't unlocked its full potential. But anyway, I think that this retroactively makes me appreciate some of the story beforehand more. Things that I thought it was really hype when Luffy unlocked Conqueror's haki and he showed it off in Marineford, but it isn't until basically right now that I fully understand what that means and how that could instill fear in the Marines, such as Akainu. From the moment that Luffy demonstrated Conqueror's haki, it seemed like Akainu was on the warpath to make sure that he died, and it makes sense. I don't really want to spend this whole video power scaling. I know it's a deep subject for which a lot of people have a lot more interest than I do. So I'm just gonna, the point of this is to say that I came into this expecting Green Bull to do more, and expecting to be disappointed if he was just washed. But now I just feel as if I've accepted it. I feel as if this was actually a very important moment for Oda setting the expectations of the story, even if they were different from what I might have thought beforehand. Like, I could see, and I thought this initially, like, what was the point of introducing Green Bull to Wano if this was all that his story was going to amount to? What was the point of introducing Shanks here if we don't actually see, if he just leaves immediately, right? It was this. It was the power scaling aspect of it that makes you understand the story more clearly. I think that, in fact, it was very important. As unbiasedly as I can put it, I think that if you don't like this, it is a purely subjective preference, like you wanted the admirals to be more, but I don't think that there's anything from the story that justifies it, and I think it all makes sense, and now you need to reevaluate where you see the roles that these characters are playing. The way I do it is seeing the Marines as a whole organization like a Yonko crew, where someone like Kainu could be your Yonko level fighter, and just like with actual Yonko crews with the possible exception of Luffy, he has no rival, there's no equal, there's nobody that could confront him from the Marine ranks. They're all significantly weaker. Now I said with the possible exception of Luffy, and I know that that's going to trigger a lot of people, but I just get the feeling that a lot of the Yonko crews, they dominated their following, their subordinates. Whitebeard, for instance, Ace and Marco, everyone is trying to make Whitebeard king. There's no, what is their individual ambition? Is it really that great? And I think the answer is no. With Kaido and Big Mom, they suppress their subordinates' will, or at the very least you can see how the ambition between the Yonko and their followers is on different planets entirely. Now, whereas with the Straw Hat crew, Luffy facilitates people with ambition. That's who he recruits, who have incredible dreams. So it gives the potential that the Straw Hats are going to have more overall top tiers. Even though, if you say compare Zoro's ambition with Luffy's ambition, I do think that Luffy's ambition is going to be higher. But Zoro by himself, being the strongest swordsman, that is pretty high up there. And for me, almost definitely is going to put Zoro on a Yonko level sort of realm eventually. But anyway, it's incredible just how far Momonosuke's come in such a short time. I feel like Oda almost addressed how we felt about the current chapters, how weird everything was set up. I mean, we just won the battle, and then we have a new threat coming in here trying to do something, and it just felt weird. And in this chapter, we see Momonosuke pretty much comment exactly that. I mean, we just won. They just won. If we can't defend ourselves, then they can't progress in their journey. I like that this was something that was actively stated. Oda's protecting the Straw Hat crew from needing to defend their territory, at least trying to. And it also kind of introduces this new concept I hadn't considered before, that the Straw Hats actually leave each country that they save a little bit stronger. They inject a little bit of their ambition, their strength into them by encouraging their resolve. We need to be strong for the Straw Hats is not only true for these countries, but also true for actual Straw Hat members. Wano itself in a very low-key way is being personified as a crew member, treated, although they're not included on the adventure, treated in a similar way. So Luffy leaves them with this reserve of strength. Again, ambition is HAKI, right? So your willpower is HAKI. The things that strengthen you. Luffy commonly says that he doesn't plan on conquering anything. This is true of members of the Straw Hat's crew, just the same as it's true for the various countries that he leaves. He leaves them with their spirit actually strengthened, which is overall a concept I have not spent too much time thinking about, but now that we sit here, it's like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense. It reminds me a lot of Laboon, where you can clearly see where Laboon started when Luffy encountered him, and then after he left, Laboon's state of mind. Laboon was an island whale, so it was in fact an island. So you've applied this like island whale Laboon concept to the country of Wano. But anyway, I'm not sure if I've totally accepted the new Momonosuke quite yet, particularly with how quickly he's jumped to where he is now. That being said, I do like this new Momonosuke far more than I like the old one, and it's very clear he is now straight on the path of becoming a great shogun, without question. But the other part of the chapter was just as hype, for me even more so, because I love the cool world building elements of One Piece, and this chapter made Wano the literal coolest island, maybe in rival with Skypiea or the Sky Islands. I like those a lot too, but this is right up there with the coolest islands that exist, period. We learned that Wano used to be far larger. It was actually an island on sea level, and they had a giant mountain, which we've seen the whole story, Mount Fuji, but we only saw the tip of it. In order to defend themselves, they erected walls around the island, which slowly filled with rainwater, and forced the residents to go live up to the top of the mountain. There's really so much to say here. First off, the walls that Wano erected around itself don't appear like walls at all. It appears like natural rock formation. It makes me think about the Red Line, quite honestly, like some sort of devil fruit power, clearly, or some magic created these walls of rock, because it certainly isn't a man-made thing. But the rock does look awfully similar to various rock structures that actually exist outside of the wall. we can see in the currents that surround Wano like individual pillars of rock. So I assume that those were created using the same power. And it makes me wonder about what those were used for. Did they calculate how that would create currents, create whirlpools, and just make the seas around Wano difficult to navigate? Or was this like, I think about Aokiji, right? Aokiji uses his ice powers to travel across the sea using his bike. A lot of devil fruit users use their devil fruits as conveniences. So I have this mental image in my mind of some devil fruit user from Wano during the Void Century hopping around Wano, maybe attacking ships, but using his devil fruit to create footholds so that he wouldn't go into the water. I don't know if this is true or not, but the thought of it is just awesome. The other mental image that I really like is, again, take yourself back to the Void Century, and the ancient kingdom has lost the war, and Wano is now a target of your enemies. You then are surrounded by ships, and your destruction seems imminent because your enemies are too strong. So you have a single devil fruit user from Wano construct or use his fruit to suddenly create walls around the whole country that could not be bypassed. Not necessarily a thing that they wanted to do, but what they were forced to in order to protect their people. As just a random bit of made up lore, I like it. But at the same time, this accomplishes the very same thing that is true for other entities that we know were probably associated with the ancient kingdom. The fishmen, for instance, have walls surrounding their island. That wall is the ocean itself, the depths of the sea. Of course, the minks went up on Zou, so their defense is the giant elephant. Then Tadtada went into the forest. And now we know that the people of Wano constructed a wall. And overall, the design I get for Wano, at least the base one before you add in the mountain and change over time, is Wano was a lot like Thriller Bark, which is fitting, I feel like, because Gecko Moria, we know, visited Wano. That's where he got Ryuma from Ryuma's grave. Maybe that inspired Thriller Bark. But I still have some questions. Like, we see an image of old Wano as it was filling up with water, and Oda specifically drew the mountain Mount Fuji looking like a more normal mountain, or more normal volcano. And then we see a progression of its evolution as Wano moved up to its surface, and suddenly there's more land that exists at the top of the mountain. Was this the same devil fruit used again, or was there some other means for which they could create land where it didn't used to exist? This relates to a theory from very early on in Wano, but a lot of people notice that Wano itself just looks patched together, like each individual region of Wano is its own distinct island. So does this have something to do with how it was constructed, the devil fruit was used, or were literal islands taken there? Either way, this felt like Alabasta on crack. You remember with Alabasta there was a poneglyph that was hidden beneath the palace and they had to travel through a tunnel to get there. Like, this felt very similar, but on an insanely larger scale. And then you add in the fact that there's an entire ancient town submerged in water. The visuals of this are just too cool, and I almost feel sad that the rest of the Straw Hats weren't here to see that. I mean, this is the kind of adventure that I live for, right? Luffy should be here, I should visit here. I don't know if he will or not, but he should. Strangely enough, the person who is actually here with Tengyama Tetsu and Robin is Law. And I'm just gonna be frank with you, right? Like, I know that a lot of people love Law. Law is a friend and not food, but it's pretty much straight up overt that his presence is weird. And him showing up when he did is probably a sign of something. This isn't the first time that Law has taken an interest either, because we saw in the middle of the raid to Onigashima, Law's scoping out the other poneglyph. Hitetsu's exact words was, "You did well to sniff us out." I really don't think that you need me to tell you that this is sketchy. All of this is sketchy. Law doesn't need to be here, right? Robin is the one who's following the poneglyph. She would take this information back to the Strides. Law is doing something for himself, and it doesn't necessarily have to align with his alliance with the Straw Hats or what they want. I'm just telling you guys, there's lots of ways that it could go. Lots of ways. We speculated in just the previous video, which is totally worth a watch as well, that Law could be a member of Sword. Sword could have their own agenda. He could be finding these clues for some reason or another, not necessarily for himself, but for somebody else. At the same time, he is a pirate. Perhaps he sees some value in finding Laugh-Tale himself. Who knows? The point is that he's being sketchy. That is now obvious. So expect something. I think more than the poneglyphs though, the thing that intrigues me about Law being here is the ancient weapon Pluton. Like, he knows now for sure where Pluton is and roughly how to get it. That's the information that I think is going to become relevant at some point in time. And that's a great question for us to chew on. We learned that the walls, if you open the borders of Wano and you have to take the walls down, that is the only way to release Pluton, which it's kind of difficult to wrap my mind around. Like, I don't know how much I should look into this or not. Like, for instance, Law could, if he saw Pluton, could probably use his abilities to take it someplace else, regardless of how large it is. So I'm assuming that it's not in a place where you can have a direct line of sight to it. Nor is it so easy to swim there. And it's just simply so large that the water within Wano needs to be drained in order to retrieve it. So it would be a big excavation project. That's just my gut feeling based on what was said in the chapter. Of course, it could be even crazier than that. Not that I can wrap my mind around that, but I'm just saying, with Oda, you can expect that that's a possibility. But overall, this chapter got me thinking about whether or not Luffy's going to be the one to open the borders of Wano, or whether the borders of Wano are going to be opened by somebody else, and not necessarily because Momonosuke wanted them to. I don't know, that was just a very intrusive thought that I got, especially with Pluton being here. I never really expect the Strats to use Pluton. It's just never been a thing that I felt like was likely to happen. And then also, once we leave Wano, do you really expect the Strats to just take a detour, stop by Wano real fast, open up the borders to go get Pluton, and then carry on their merry way? It just doesn't feel like it makes too much sense for the story. It would make more sense for someone else to sort of acquire it and then meet Straw Hats in the natural progression of their journey. So, how is that going to happen? Is this how the information that Law has acquired, how it's going to be useful? Could a Kainu come here where they think that they're safe, or they try to be safe, but at the end of the day, they're not? I'm sure with these poneglyphs, and like someone like Blackbeard comes to mind as Wano should be a target for him. So we also have this potential of multiple Joy Boy candidates. I know that it's pretty obvious that Luffy must be the guy with the devil fruit that he has, but maybe not. We know that Blackbeard can steal devil fruit, so if he intends on being Joy Boy, he could literally steal Luffy's devil fruit, and at least in that way you could believe, or that he could believe, that he could become that person. So in pursuit of fulfilling the prophecy of Joy Boy, he could take down Wano's borders somehow and then acquire Pluton, with his final objective being, and likely a source of conflict during their battle, is taking Luffy's devil fruit, taking it for himself so that he can become Joy Boy. The other intrusive thought that I had with this chapter that you're absolutely free to ignore, but the language of sleeping ancient weapon Pluton, for some reason as I read the chapter, I took this much more literally than I ever have in the past, as though Pluton is a kind of creature, or has some sort of life, like the theory that we talked about recently, Klabautermon, perhaps. I mean, that would fit, and I can't shake the thought. The other thing he says is that opening the borders would set loose the ancient weapon, as though as soon as the walls come down, the Pluton isn't going to be controlled by anybody. It is its own thing. It has a will of its own. Taking down the walls would free it. But anyway, the world building was incredible. We're left with questions that I'm excited to see the answer for, what they become. Shanks was awesome in the chapter. We have our third world poneglyph, and we have one more to go. It appears as if we're very soon set to continue our journey and to find the next one. Green Bull is leaving, so there's nothing that appears imminent that's going to stop the Straw Hats. At the same time, I also get the impression that Shanks is leaving. What he accomplished while he was here, I have no idea. It didn't appear as if he accomplished anything. Maybe they came to sort of watch to see who won, and then once Luffy won, they didn't have anything to do, or were they here the entire time and pilfered, for instance, rubbings of poneglyphs while no one was looking? Who knows? But now it seems like they're leaving, so I think that we're leaving soon as well. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I had to say today. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Share your thoughts. As always, like the video, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. We're making content. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.